Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another episode of Healing Ties 2.0, featured on the Whole Care Network and on UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. I'm your host and presenter, Christopher McClellan. You just might know me as the Bowtie Guy. On this episode of Healing Ties 2.0, we visit with Marianne Scuicco, who is a registered nurse and the founding member and manager of AlzAuthors.com. AlzAuthors is a global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from their personal experiences. On AlzAuthors, you'll discover hundreds of inspirational stories which span all Alzheimer's and dementia stages to offer you keen insights and better understanding of this insidious disease. Marianne also hosts and produces the popular Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia podcast, which is available on AlzAuthors.com, all of your popular podcast platforms, and the Whole Care Network. Let's join my delightful conversation with Marianne and learn more about the wonderful work of AlzAuthors, and I'll see you on the other side of the program. Well, greetings, Marianne, and welcome to this episode of Healing Ties 2.0. It's great to visit with you today.
Hi, Chris. It's always good to see you again.
Yeah, we're kind of like long-lost friends. We've been visiting for a number of years now, and your podcast is doing great, but I know all these great things about you, but our listeners may not. So as I'm prone to do, Marianne, how are you creating Healing Ties?
Chris, I am one of the co-founders and a manager-director for AlzAuthors, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience. And we're creating Healing Ties by hosting a platform for authors who have written their stories to get their stories into the hands of caregivers who need them. So it's kind of healing on both sides. Many of the authors have written down their stories, memorializing their loved ones and sharing everything that they've learned as a sort of therapy for themselves after their caregiving journey has met its natural end. And then their stories become valuable guidebooks and knowledge, comfort, support for people who are currently on that journey. So we have almost 300 authors at this point, and more than 300 resources on our website, AlzAuthors.com.
Sharing resources and sharing stories, I don't think there's any better way to advocate.
Absolutely. We say the caregivers are the experts when it comes to caregiving.
We are so in line with that because we can do all this. We can gather all the statistics and all the data, but without the stories and the caregivers sharing those stories, the data just doesn't match up without them.
No. People want to know they're not alone. Somebody out there is doing the same thing you're doing right now, stressed out, overwhelmed, or maybe even enjoying, as we do know many people enjoy their caregiving. They would not do it. But it can be difficult.
Sure, especially when you feel like you're alone, because caregiving is so often unplanned, and you find yourself in this role. It may start out. There was a conversation recently on Twitter about I think it was a comment that our friend Amy Goyer had mentioned about there's nothing informal about caregiving. We need to stop using that word. But sometimes caregiving starts out very informal, as a trip to the grocery store or a ride to the doctor, and then conditions change, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or that first indication that there's some memory problems.
Yes, a lot of the authors who have written in AlzAuthors were thrust into their caregiving role unexpectedly and sometimes unwillingly. So that's always interesting. And then we have those people who have been caregivers all of their lives, really, since childhood, looking out for others. So it might not be so unexpected for them. But anyway, you still need resources at hand. You still need to know how to go about the whole caregiving process. And that's where I think people get mixed up, because they don't often have that. And when they're in the middle of doing it, they don't have time to figure it out. So that just makes the situation more stressful.
So how did you come up with this concept of the AlzAuthors? Now, you're an author yourself, I understand, but how did you take this plan from the back of your mind to reality?
I stole it from somebody else.
Borrowed is the better.
Yes. So when I had published my book, Blue Hydrangeas, an Alzheimer's Love Story, back in 2013, I was independently published. Did not know much about being a published author, but I knew I had a good book and people liked it right from the start. So I tried to develop an audience, and it was really hard. A book about Alzheimer's, even if it is a love story, seemed to be a tough niche to fill. So I had joined a group online called Clean Indie Reads, and we were a supportive group of authors helping to promote each other's books, because it's much easier to promote someone else's work than to constantly be saying, buy my book, or here's my book.
Oh boy, do I get that, 100%.
Yeah. So I joined this organization, and when I was one of the first few hundred, I think, that got on at the beginning. And now they're like 4,000 or 5,000 authors strong. But anyway, we would tweet for each other and share our books on each other's blogs and in newsletters. And it was a good collaborative. And I started thinking, well, I wonder if I could find other authors of books about Alzheimer's and dementia and see if we can do the same thing. So I had been communicating with another author named Jean Lee on Twitter. She is the author of Alzheimer's Daughter.
Yeah.
Yes, Jean. And she had reached out to me because she had read my book and loved it. And then when she had published her book, she asked me if I would take a look at it, and I did, and it was a wonderful book. So I approached her and I suggested, why don't we work together and try to help each other promote these books? And so she was all gung-ho for that. And I said, do you know anybody else that might want to help? And she said, oh, I think I do. And that was Vicky Tapia. So we got Vicky on board. And the three of us, it was in 2015, we did a cross-promotion campaign for Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month in June. Just sharing not blog posts, well, on each other's blogs, we shared our books, but we did most of it on Twitter, Facebook. Just sharing memes and information about Alzheimer's, trying to get the name out. And then we had such a good time, we decided to do it again in November, which was National Caregiver Appreciation Month. And we had some other people join us. And then in June of 2016, we got the idea, why don't we start a blog? And we'll post a new author every day for 4 weeks, the entire month of June, Monday through Friday. So 20 authors, 20 books. And we said, well, who's going to write these posts for us? Why would anybody write us a post? Well, at the end of the month, we still had authors. And we had so much fun, and we liked each other. So we said, let's just keep doing this every week. So next thing you know, we have over 300 authors. We have a podcast. We have a bookstore. We have volunteers. We have a traveling library. We're a 501c3. And we're big social media presence. And everybody gets along great. We're good friends. We got to meet each other twice in person. And it's just been a real exciting ride. We have gotten a lot of good feedback that readers and caregivers have found our resources, and they can trust that the books have been vetted, they're read and reviewed by a member of our team before we invite the author to come into AlzAuthors. So we don't take every book that comes our way. And we have a variety of books on all kinds of different types of dementia, and also on the different types of caring relationships. So whether you're caring for your parent, your grandparent, your spouse, your partner, if you're a healthcare professional, we offer a really broad variety of topics and situations.
You know what comes to mind as I hear you tell the story of how this all started? And what I think that is across the board and just about any caregiver's journey is that there really are no strangers when it comes to caregivers. Mm-hmm. We may not know each other, But when we share our stories and our experiences, we instantly know each other. And there's that comfort that in talking to somebody that you may never have talked to before, but when you share that little piece of what's going on in our lives, there's that instant connection.
Yeah, you see that a lot in the Facebook groups, the support groups, because I bounce in and out of those. And people are so generous in sharing their stories and sharing their advice for others. And these people are all strangers. We know that. So I think that people, once they reach out and try to find others in their tribe, then it's going to make their journey a lot easier than it is. I know caregivers may tend to be isolating because they're just so busy juggling, running from one thing to the next, especially if you also have to work and you have children and run your own home and trying to run back and forth to mom and dad or be at their side 24/7 in some cases. So even if you can just reach out virtually to a caregiving community, it's going to help you.
Exactly, and having that the opportunity just a starting spot, where you know that you're going to feel welcomed and comforted because wait a minute, I mean, there's other people that are doing this. I'm not the only one, and there's certain circumstances that seem similar. I could talk to this person and find out a little bit more about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it was the same way in the writers group that I originally joined, where I was meeting new friends from around the world, because it is global, who were also trying to publish books and market their books and sharing, their stories and their information and how they managed to do this and copycatting. That's like an important thing. When you see somebody else's way of doing something, you think, well, gee, I wonder if that will work for me. And you take it and use it for your own and adapt it to your own needs. And now you have a new method. You have a new technique. It's kind of like the same thing.
So tell us a little bit about your book and why you wrote your book.
Well, I always wanted to write a book. That was my goal since I was a little girl, and realized that people actually wrote these things that they call books. So in 2002, I said, I'm going to write this book, finally, whatever. I didn't even have an idea for a book at the time because I had a near drowning episode. And I thought I did
not know that.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I thought I didn't think I was going to make it that day. I got caught in a riptide off of Provincetown, Massachusetts. And it was really scary. And I said, okay, you're going to write the book that you always wanted to write because, we don't know how long we're going to be here. So I said, I'm going to start getting to work on that. So I came up with an idea, and I was kind of writing something, and it didn't really gel with me. And one day at work, I'm a nurse, and I worked as a case manager in a rehab unit, inpatient rehab in a hospital. And I met this lovely lady who was due for the discharge the next day. She was 86 years old, and she had Alzheimer's, and she was absolutely captivating. And during our conversation, she would just laugh, and she would say, oh, I'm so mixed up. And her husband was sitting next to her, and he would just smile. And the thing about the two of them is they had driven all the way from Florida, the state of Florida, to New York by themselves without any mishap. And then after she had gotten home, she fell and she fractured her pelvis. So that's why she was in the rehab. And the next day she was going to be transferred to like a nursing facility to continue her rehab. And when I met with them just to talk over the discharge plan, they had a son, and he happened to be in the room. And he said to me, tomorrow I'm going to come and I want to bring my parents to the facility. I don't want them to leave here without me. I'm going to drive them. Is that okay? And yeah, you can do that. That's okay. Well, then I went home that night, and I was thinking about those people because I was just enchanted with this woman. And I started thinking, well, what would happen if these people somehow they left the hospital without their son? Where would they go? what would they do? I mean, we know that they're capable of driving to Florida. So, yeah, so I started thinking, okay, so the son doesn't get there in time. They take off. He takes her wherever. He thinks he's taking her to this a facility, assisted living. He agrees to try it for a week, my fictional character. And then they show up. They're missing. And the son is frantic trying to find his parents. Mm-hmm. So that's how that story came. It was based not only on this couple, but on many other couples that I had encountered in my career. And I told it from the perspective of the husband, the male caregiver, because most of the time people think of caregivers and they think of a woman. You know, a mother, a woman taking care. Mm-hmm.
I'm very familiar with that concept.
Yeah. So I said, well, I knew a lot of really great male caregivers, and I wanted to honor them, so I put them in the starring role. So it's all about Jack and how he's struggling. He had promised his wife when they got at the diagnosis that he would not leave her, and they were going to stay right here in their house called Blue Hydrangeas, which is a bed and breakfast on Cape Cod. Mm-hmm. So he, for 9 years, keeps the promise. But now, 9 years later, he's got his own health problems. Things are falling apart. He just can't do it anymore. He's proud. He doesn't want to reach out for help. And then there's a cascade of events that lead to him finally relinquishing his control. He picks her up at the hospital, forgets about his son. They let him take her out, as he always did. So the nurse didn't realize she was making a mistake by letting him take her. So he takes her. And then when he brings her to the place and realizes what's going to happen, it's the separation is what traumatizes him. And the look on her face when she sees where they are, and she knows that she's going to go in there and he's not going to go with her, is devastating to them. And he just looks at her, he puts the car back in drive and drives away and says, we're not doing this today. And then they're off on their adventure. And they have an adventure. And the son is on, trying to track them down.
Oh, you have described this like I can picture these things happening. What? Oh goodness.
Yeah. So they take a ride. They go back to where they had been in the past to their happy days, which was in Truro, Mass, on the Cape Cod National Seashore. They end up in Provincetown. It's in the middle of July. There's 40,000 people walking through the streets.
People in Provincetown.
Yeah, it's wall-to-wall people. It's a beautiful summer day. And, the inevitable happens. She wanders off. And that's where I'll end it. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Well, you just have to pick up the book.
You have to read the rest of the book.
Yeah, there was so many things that you said that were important in the story, but one that really stuck with me, because we all experience this. We want to go back to the way it used to be. Mm-hmm. I think as my listeners have heard me talk about my caregiving journey zillions of times, and we've talked about it before, but when we look back now that it's once it's over, we often long for those days the way that it was.
Yeah.
And with you being a nurse, I know you're going to get this. We sometimes miss those days where our care partner, and I'm using the generic term care partner, for me it was my loved one, where there's that plateau and they're never going back to the way they were. And having that caregiver recognize, there's that we've reached another plateau, and how do you adjust to that? It's so hard when you're in the midst of things, when you really want things to be like they were.
Yeah, and then you realize there's no pill for that. There's no doctor that has the answer for that. You know, when I had my own dementia story when my stepfather was diagnosed, and that came upon us so unexpectedly, which in hindsight is kind of ridiculous because he always had cognitive problems since birth. And so we just mistook his behaviors as they exacerbated that it was just him and he was just being a jerk and he was fooling around and, you know, it's not, nothing we can do about it. It's not a big deal. And then holy smoke, the next thing we know, we're just like in a catastrophe. Just something needs to be done here. And my mom, she was the one who was just could not accept it. She didn't even see it coming. Then she beat herself up because she's like, why didn't I see this? I'm like, well,
why didn't I see it?
You were sucked into it too, you know. You just thought he was just being his usual PIA because he was. Anybody who knew him, you know, he's a PIA all the time.
I haven't heard that acronym in a long time. Maybe that's a good thing, but PIA,
yeah, well, that
good.
Describes this man. Yeah,
and we'll put that acronym in the show notes for you.
Okay.
We won't.
yeah. He just was a troublemaker. He was very juvenile. He liked to have fun. He always said, "I'm only fooling. I'm only fooling around." But you know, he did mean to hurt, and he did hurt, and he did disrupt. He was a big disruptor. So, you know, yeah, huge. But he had some crazy, bizarre behaviors. But we thought maybe he was doing it willfully. So, for instance, he would just sit in a chair in his recliner. We bought him this beautiful top-notch recliner. And for hours lay there and just repeat the same things over and over again. And we like, what are you doing? You know, why? Will you stop? You're trying to watch TV. You're trying to have a conversation. And he's just in the background saying the same old thing over and over again. So that was kind of like a clue that there's a little bit more to this than fooling around. Something's going on. And I, being the nurse, A, the nurse, B, the oldest child, and C, the only daughter, and very involved with my mom's life, because at the time she's like 88. You know, he was like 79. My mother's 88 years old when the dementia strikes her husband, so it's really awful, and we got to get him looked at. So he was immediately diagnosed, and then they told me on the very first appointment he needs to go to memory care. We were like not prepared for that at all. I said, what do you mean? Why can't I just get like some home health aides to come in and help them? And they said, oh, no. And then the home health aides, they wouldn't even send people. The agencies were like, oh, no, we can't have we're not going to send our staff into this situation because he was, you know, abusive. He was verbally abusive.
Right.
And he wasn't physically abusive, but I was afraid that he could be. So the last night,
such a drastic change so quickly, you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So my mom, she, you know, even up until the end, he was in the facility, and she still couldn't come to grips with it. I don't think she ever really did. And then she started with her own problems. So it just is like one thing escalates upon another. It's like a major downfall, because up until that point they was so independent. My mom, she had a full life. She got up every day and went to 8:00 mass. She did that day after day for years and years, and that's what happened. She went to church with her friend one morning. He didn't come get her, so he lived around the corner, so she walked over to see what was going on. Are you going? And she said he didn't look too good, like he didn't look like he had a good night. And she said, well, let's not go. You don't look like you feel good. He said, no, I can go. Let's go. So they get in the car and they go. And they're on the way. I think they're on the way back. He has a stroke. So he's driving the car. He doesn't have a seatbelt. He hits another car. He gets thrown on top of my mom, crushes her against the passenger door.
Oh, my goodness.
Breaks her ribs, her shoulder, her sternum. So she's got multiple fractures. Now, in the meantime, we've got this dementia workup going on for her husband. So it was like everything at once. And she, at that point, no more caregiving. She kept him in line for years. She was so on top of him, but once that accident hit, her caregiving was done. She could not even care for herself. So that's when we had to finally say we have to do something with him.
Yeah, stepped in as the advocate, and it's just just kind of goes to the prospect, I guess is the word that comes to mind here, that when one diagnosis comes in, it just doesn't affect the person who's been diagnosed. It impacts everybody, and I don't think at times we get that the diagnosis has an impact beyond the person who's been diagnosed.
Oh, for sure. I know with Alzheimer's and dementia, there are approximately 6 million people who have diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. And I always say there's at least one person for every one of them. So now we're talking 12 million people. But we know that's not true because people have more than one person in their life that cares. Some people have dozens, 5, 6. I mean, the ones that are really there for them. And some people have a lot. So it's exponential. We have no idea. But it's in the millions, 50 million maybe. I don't know. A lot. It's a lot. I don't think we could ever really get an accurate number because I don't know if I can ask this correctly or if there's a correct way to ask it. But how does a family balance somebody's I'll use the word you use, disruptive behavior, and recognize that disruptive behavior, there could be a cognitive issue that could lead to dementia or Alzheimer's. How does a family that's new to this balance that? It's very difficult because if the person's has such a behavior change that, is so out of character for them, then that's gives you a better clue. But like with my stepfather, it was kind of like more of the same, just a little worse. But the families, the family members, the hard thing is everybody approaches the situation with their own perspective. And everybody has a different stake in the game. So you might have somebody like with me, and I was lucky because my siblings happened to be on board. And he didn't have children, so it wasn't like I had to fight with them or just look at them and say, hey.
Made it a tad bit easier.
Yeah, this is your problem. That would have been great. But that wasn't how it was. He made me his power of attorney and his healthcare proxy. So that was my job, which I never thought was going to happen. I thought that my mother would pass first, and then I would have to deal with him. It never dawned on me this was going to happen. So everybody in the family has their own stake in the game and what they think is going to happen, what they think is going on. So you need to get all of that ironed out, and that's where the friction is, and then it gets in the way of everything else, of even getting a diagnosis. Somebody might bring the person to see a specialist and get the diagnosis, then the others don't believe it. Oh, that's they don't know what they're talking about. No, that's not what's wrong with them. Because a diagnosis of a dementia is very disruptive on its own, because the one thing about dementia care is it costs a lot of money. So now the family's financial security is in peril, because now people know that there's probably going to be a nursing home in the future, and that's going to suck everybody dry. You might have to sell your house. Who's going to be the caregiver? Who's going to quit their job and take care of this person? And, there's always one person that all of this falls onto their shoulders. So that's the hard thing.
All those unanswered questions that come up, that in most cases people haven't had the foresight to talk about. It's a lot of these things are dealt with in the middle of a crisis when everybody's emotional and goodness, easier said than done. But if we could figure out a way to have some of these conversations before these things happen, makes these situations just a tad bit easier.
People don't like to talk about money. So
Right.
you either have parents who are trying to be proactive and the kids don't want to deal with thinking about the end of their parents' lives. So they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to engage in a conversation. And then you have situations where parents, they don't want their children to know what they have because of the possibility that the children will try to take it prematurely, which
That
we see a
certainly has
lot.
happened before.
Yes.
Yeah,
So a lot of people try to be quiet about what their assets are because, other family members can bleed you dry. I think most families have experienced that with someone who is always in need and or can't support themselves on mom and dad's bank account. So that's another issue.
Goodness.
People don't want to talk. So, and that's just the financial piece. There's other pieces as well.
There's other pieces to it. The family dynamics play a big role into a lot of these decisions, and but you're creating an awareness through AlzAuthors that is helping people manage these difficult conversations because you're using examples of people who've been in the trenches.
Yeah, and there are people who have written about their stories, with siblings that wouldn't help or didn't go along or took advantage. There's a lot of stories like that.
Goodness. Well, I think this is a perfect time for us to take our break. And say, Marianne, you're going to be put on the spot when we come back. So when we come back from our break, I'm going to ask you to reveal one fun fact about yourself that I may not know, and I know all of our listeners are on the edge of their seats wanting to know. So put your thinking cap on. So you're listening to Healing Ties on the Whole Care Network and UK Health Radio, the world's #1 talk health radio. We'll be right back. Hey, it's Christopher McClellan. You just might know me as the Bowtie Guy on Healing Ties 2.0. On Healing Ties, we visit with people from all over the globe who share their stories because it's through story sharing where diversity meets the road to collaborate on a common cause. And if you'd like to share your story on Healing Ties, email me direct at thebowtieguy@healingties.com. We would love to share your story to your health, happiness, and prosperity. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's that's time in the show where we put our guest on the spot for that fun fact. Now, Marianne, I know a little bit about you. I don't know everything, but I'm sure there's one fun fact that you'd like to reveal here on Healing Ties for the whole world to know.
All right. So right now, as we're recording this, we are in the midst of the Tokyo Olympics. And one of my favorite sports in the Olympics is swimming. And the reason for that is not because I am a swimmer, because I certainly am not, but I am a swim mom. And my daughter swam competitively for 11 years in club, varsity, and college. So we were on the road and on the pool deck for years on end, and all of the sitting on those cold metal bleachers inspired me to write a book about girls varsity swimming, and it's called Swim Season. And I am particularly proud of that book.
That is awesome. So you have another. I see. I did not know about this book.
You did not know about this book.
I did not know about this. See, that's why we do these fun facts, because the first half of the show is kind of intense at times, and this is really cool. So tell us a little bit about this book.
So this is a YA young adult novel, and it's about a swimmer named Erin Keene who is the new girl in town. She is escaping from some family drama and trauma. Her senior year in high school, she goes to live with her mom's best friend in a little town in New York and joins the swim team. She's destined to go to the Olympics, but on this swim team, she doesn't want to swim to win anymore. She just uses her pool time as therapy, and she's just being one of the girls. Well, there's a very competitive team. There's a challenge that's been on the boards for, 15 years or so. The Nobody has ever broken the record for the 500 freestyle, and the girl who set it is now an entrepreneur, and every year has a scholarship challenge. Whoever breaks my record gets a $50,000 scholarship. So there's one girl on the team, and she's poised to do that this year. And then here comes our young heroine, Erin, who's going to the Olympics someday. And she's there, the new girl, to challenge that school record. And there is drama in and out of the pool in swim season. So if you love swimming like I do, and especially Olympic swimming, you may want to check out this book. It's a great book for young readers, too, anywhere from 12 years old and up. It's a clean story. There's no foul language or sexual encounters or graphic violence or anything like that.
It's just a good, wholesome story.
It is. It's got great reviews. Make a good movie.
Well, I'm going to have to check this one out now. See?
Yes, you are.
You revealed a very fun fact, and you don't talk about that a whole lot because I've known you for a few years now. That's the first I've heard of that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that is very cool.
Yeah, I'm promoting it now because it's Olympic time, so I usually promote it during the Olympic season. It's an audiobook, ebook, and paperback.
And where can people find that book?
On Amazon and at your favorite bookseller. Audible,
very good.
Apple iTunes. Yeah, I love the narrator did a fantastic job. So I really like the audio version.
I will be downloading that this evening to listen to it. That is off the charts.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
But back on topic. Well, that's a good topic anyway. But one of the things that as I was reflecting on our conversation in the first half, and we just touched on it a little bit about your nursing career. I'd be interested to from your perspective on how your career in nursing has impacted your work with the AlzAuthors, the things that you've seen as a nurse, dealing with patients and family. Not asking you to reveal any names, but that experience that has been so important, your professional experience has been so important as you've developed AlzAuthors. When
you're a nurse and you encounter families with dementia families in the hospital setting, there's usually in crisis because the loved one is ill for some reason, or they've had an injury, or perhaps they're at the end of their life. And families they're just frazzled. A lot of families are women, caregivers. They're, middle-aged women. They have kids. They have jobs. They have to run their own house. Now they're here in the hospital trying to sit with their loved one and help the nursing staff because, again, being in a hospital is very disruptive for somebody with dementia, so they may escalate their behaviors and create, stress amongst the nursing staff and for the other patients. So family caregivers come in, they sit often and stay and help with their loved one. But I know that in my experience, just being able to provide people with information about resources in the community would be a big help because they often didn't even know that, we have the Alzheimer's Association. There's the Office of Aging. There are daycare available for elders in our community. There's what you call memory cafe. That wasn't the word then, but, that. Churches offered services. People are so involved in what they're doing that they don't have time to figure out, well, what else is there? What else can I be doing? So being a reader, whenever I have a problem or something, I would go to a book, go to the library, or go on the internet to find my answers, but that takes time. And when you're caregiving, you may not even have time to do that. So we came up with the idea of AlzAuthors to provide a place for people to go to find answers to their questions and concerns where they can be comfortable. They're not going to be inundated with a lot of other extraneous stuff that's going to get in the way, send them down a rabbit hole, waste their time. And we also learned after a couple of years that the caregivers don't even have time to read. Because if you want to read a book, you need to stop what you're doing and open the book and focus on the book. I mean, there's no multitasking when you're reading a book. So that's how we came up with the idea of the podcast, of sharing the author's stories in an audible format. So now people can listen to the stories while they're doing dishes or driving or waiting at the doctor's office or doing something else. You can multitask and listen at the same time. So we decided to provide that resource in an audible version. So that's how my nursing helped with AlzAuthors, coming up with our format.
Because you've been able to see it from and I use this word lightly, bird's hand view.
Yeah, you have a front row seat in the theater of life. That's what I call it.
And I love that, a front row seat. And
yeah, nursing is
the
nursing career is very intense. You get involved in things that a lot of people I don't even think are prepared for. I know I certainly wasn't. A lot of drama. I mean, it's like being in a TV show. Sometimes I'd be looking at myself feeling like I was, where's the cameraman? Because I feel like I'm in the movies right now with what's happening with these people. And I'm happy to be in the middle of it trying to help. And there's just no end to the different kinds of situations. And I'm sure in the last year or so, it's been even more so. The medical personnel in this country have been battered for over a year now with COVID. Yeah, I mean, just I'm grateful I'm not one of them. I'm past that part of my career, thank God, because I don't know if I would have lasted. But I know that people are at their breaking point with this. I can just imagine the scenes that they've had to witness, and then that enters into your consciousness. And a lot of times when there's a massive, like traumatic, like a death or something horrible, they would have debriefing. And I don't even know if they even did any of that during COVID. There wasn't even time for it, but there would be, a time for people to sit and kind of like unload, because you end up absorbing it and you would just go on to the next task, and then it would be the end of the day, and you'd be like wondering, why do I feel like somebody just, roll over me with a Mack truck? Emotionally, you're just distraught because you witnessed something that was, sad, painful, just situation you couldn't fix. You feel like a failure.
Wow.
So, there's a lot of that going on. I try to use that in my writing.
Your writing, I would imagine, is cathartic for you.
Yeah. Yeah, my main character, her mom in swim season, she's a nurse, and she's went into join the army to serve in Iraq, to serve the soldiers after 9/11. And that's where all her troubles start. And she was just that type of a helping person. And I used, she ends up injured and then with a opioid addiction. So that's part of the reason why the character isn't with her mom in her senior year in high school. But I wrote a good storyline with that character. So.
I'm anxious to read this swimming book, and I'm really, really honored to be able to call you a friend. But Marianne, let all of our listeners know how they can learn more about your work, AlzAuthors, and get a copy of all your books.
Okay, so my website is mariannescuicco.com. It's MarianneSciucco.com. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And my the AlzAuthors are at AlzAuthors, AlzAuthors.com. And we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we're on Whole Care Network, and you can find our podcasts on all the popular podcast platforms.
Marianne, with the great work you're doing, both personally as a nurse and as an author, and the work that you're doing with AlzAuthors, you are certainly someone who's creating healing ties all around us. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story today, and I'm just really proud to be able to call you a friend.
Thank you, Chris. I'm proud to call you a friend, too. Thanks for everything you do for AlzAuthors.
AlzAuthors offers the most comprehensive collection of books and blogs on Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I encourage you to check out their great work and tremendous resources and soothing words of wisdom on AlzAuthors.com. And thank you for joining us today for this episode of Healing Ties 2.0. And if you'd like to share your story on Healing Ties, email me direct at thebowtieguy@healingties.com. We would love to share your story on Healing Ties. I'm your host and presenter, Christopher McClellan. I've created a life to love after caregiving ends by being with awesome people like you. And be sure to subscribe to Healing Ties wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. We'll see you for another episode of Healing Ties real soon. Take care. Bye for now.